Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Adam Goodman, partner at Ballard Partners. Adam, thank you so much for coming on.
Another election.
Another election, this time the New Hampshire primary tonight. So, first, give us some historical context here. How much does New Hampshire really matter in the context of the primary season?
The word momentum matters, and usually coming out of New Hampshire, candidates have a sense of momentum that often drives them to the nomination. Of course, that wasn't quite in play for Joe Biden when he won the nomination in 2020. He was out almost out of power coming out of New Hampshire after his defeat there and in Iowa, but of course he came to South Carolina and rewrote history. But essentially, it's a springboard. As much as people see Iowa as winning the field, New Hampshire kind of supercharges the field moving forward.
I do want to talk about that because he was, and by he, I mean Joe Biden was pretty much written off by everyone as a goner after New Hampshire and South Carolina. Things really turned around for him. And I want to talk about numbers coming out of New Hampshire today. According to the Boston Globe, Trump is at 60% in New Hampshire and Nikki Haley is at 38%. So, what does she have to do today to have a good night? What numbers need to come out of there that she can declare that a victory and move on to South Carolina and Super Tuesday?
Nikki Haley has to come close, if not win, in New Hampshire. These are the ideal conditions for her. You talk about the primary allowing for independents and even Democrats to come into the Republican primary to vote. You have the governor of New Hampshire, Sununu, is behind Nikki Haley. You couldn't have a better shot if you're her to try to rejigger the race. But if she doesn't come close, I think that the race for the Republican nomination is over. And the reason is what's ahead after New Hampshire. You're looking at not just at Nevada, where the former president has like a 50-point lead over Nikki Haley. You look at her own home state, Brittany, of South Carolina, where by most polling, she's already down the better part of 30 points. The last thing that Nikki Haley will want to do, if she wants to preserve political options for herself moving forward, is to not only lose in New Hampshire, maybe badly, but go home and lose again. So I think my expectation is if the polls hold and Donald Trump scores a decisive victory tonight, despite Dixville Notch, which went 6-0 for Nikki Haley at midnight, if he scores a decisive win, I expect that Nikki Haley will likely not be in this race much longer.
I do want to get to Dixville Notch. Right now, all 6 votes went to Nikki Haley at midnight. I know that's only 6 votes, and it's a fun tradition. But is there any foreshadowing with that race for tonight at all?
Well, it's fun to talk about Dixville Notch. For those that don't know, that's the first hamlet that always weighs in a presidential campaign. It's a cute place, by the way. If you've never been to Dixville Notch, into the lodge there, it's worth seeing. And I remember John McCain going there and all sorts of others in the past. A lot of fun. I don't think it has any bearing on what's about to happen. For all of you that are watching tonight, though, pay special attention and early to Manchester. That's where most of the early votes will come in tonight. If Nikki Haley is going to make this competitive at all, she has to do well in Manchester and the suburbs around Manchester, or this is going to go the way the polls are predicting, which will be a big win for the former president.
And I know we're in New Hampshire today, but I want to talk about 2 people in South Carolina who ended up endorsing Donald Trump, and that's South Carolina Senator Tim Scott and Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who is from South Carolina. How devastating is this to Nikki Haley, and will this have an impact at all tonight?
There's a sense of inevitability sometimes, Brittany, that kind of seeps into a race. And that seems to be in play here. It's not just momentum, it's the inevitability that Donald Trump will be the nominee of the Republican Party in 2024. It just seems to be all but a done deal. So Tim Scott from her home state, remember, she appointed Tim Scott to the U.S. Senate, Nikki Haley did. For him to jump and endorse Trump as he has, of course, Vivek has endorsed Trump. I can tell you in my home state of Florida, everyone, since Ron DeSantis has pulled out, it seems like everybody has cascaded into the Trump camp. I think this is all, it's like a tsunami that's coming at Nikki Haley right now. And I don't think that the voters in New Hampshire, regardless of their verdict tonight, can really stand in the way of that.
Why do you think this tsunami is coming for Nikki Haley? Because before this, people have said, Republicans and Democrats alike, hey, we're done with the chaos. We're done with Donald Trump's a chaos agent. He's indicted, this, that, and the other. But now they're lining up to kiss the ring. Lest we not forget, Donald Trump called Ron DeSantis de-sanctimonious. Ron DeSantis gave him a little bit more than a lukewarm endorsement. But why is everyone now lining up to kiss the ring of a president, if he is elected again, will be a lame duck president?
To preserve their options for the future. That's a short answer. Ron DeSantis is in his mid-40s. He's done a hell of a job as governor of Florida. He's got a long track ahead of him, and maybe a good track, if he preserves those options, as opposed to he burns the bridges behind him. I think the same thing is now in play for Nikki Haley, which is why I predicted earlier in this conversation, if she doesn't come close or beat the president, look at this as the Super Bowl. For Donald Trump, it's all in. And if he wins, I think the Super Bowl will crown the champion, the Republican nomination. Nikki has to make a decision, Brittany, about whether she wants to pursue political options, especially on the Republican side of the fence, moving forward. She may not. She may have actually other plans. She may consider a third party run downstream if she finds there's no way back to the Republican faithful. But I think she's at the tipping point right now. Her rhetoric has gotten sharper against the former president. I can assure you that it hasn't gone down well with Donald Trump or any of his supporters or the MAGA base. So I think it's Judgment Day, not biblically, but politically, Judgment Day is here for Nikki Haley, and that judgment, I think, is to be seen tonight in and beyond Manchester.
Do you see a future where Nikki Haley is welcome back to the MAGA fold? Because if you look at Donald Trump's Instagram, I don't know if you saw this photoshopped photo, but it's Hillary Clinton with Nikki Haley's face superimposed on her. Is that the nail in the coffin for her political career for the far right?
It's hard to say. It's fascinating we're even having this conversation because Nikki Haley, by her record, her actions, not just the UN, but obviously as governor of South Carolina, was a conservative Republican, is a conservative Republican. And yet, in this race, she certainly is being forced into a place she never thought she'd be, allied with Hillary Clinton, the moderate, woke, and liberal, part of America. None of her record justifies that, but the rhetoric and the conversation in this campaign has reinforced that.
You brought up a word a few times in this conversation, and it's inevitable. And you and I were talking before we started filming, and we both said there's this usual excitement of this early in the primary season that seems to be lost. Do you think this is 100% inevitable for Donald Trump to be the nominee, despite any legal issues that are following him as we get to Election Day in November?
Well, taking the legal issues aside, which is maybe a big thing, yes, I think it's inevitable. I think that the former president, first of all credit to his team, Susie Wiles and Chris Lasavita and others who have run a very disciplined campaign. It's a very organization focused campaign. The message, I think, has been very disciplined as well. The former president and his rallies, I think, has been himself. Increasingly, you see the old Donald Trump kind of coming through in kind of good ways for him. I think the die is cast. We're looking at it's like an NFL game where a team is favored by 20 points, right? And if the team that's the underdog only loses by 8, maybe you give them some credit for not having been completely vanquished, but the win is the win.
When you're looking at the general election, a really devastating poll came out for President Biden from the Morning Consult, and it has Trump at 45% and Biden at 40%. Do you think this has any, we have 10 months left, so this does have wiggle room, but what does this do to Nikki Haley's argument of, hey, I'm more electable, I'm the only one that can beat Biden?
It certainly weakens it, doesn't it? I mean, you've seen poll after poll come out in the last couple of months, Brittany, where the former president is being President Joe Biden in the swing states, in almost every one of the swing states. You can say, well, could Nikki have a better margin in those swing states? Theoretically possible, right? But you can't deny the fact that the former president is looking strong. You have the Democrats and the president that are now trying to push the abortion issue and others to the forefront and trying to stop this wave. But in my opinion, I think they're playing out of the 2022 playbook and not the 24 version. And the 24 version is a referendum on where this country is and where it's going. And if you look at kind of the sense of unease a lot of Americans have about the future, that always is a burden borne by the current administration, not one that's contending to be the next administration.
That's funny you mentioned that, because Mitt Romney said something similar but about 2020, that running on I'm Saving Democracy January 6th isn't going to cut it in 24. So what are the issues that matter right now? Because the Biden administration is pushing that abortion issue. They had it a 1 minute, I believe 1 minute ad with a woman who had to flee Texas to have an abortion. So what's the winning issue that's resonating for Republican voters, or to get the independents or Democrats to say, hey, vote Republican?
If you talk about Republicans and independents, you're talking about the economy, independence, and increasingly to some degree, public safety. It's not just in America's cities, it's all across the land. Those three issues are issues that generally, Brittany, favor Republican contenders. And then, of course, on top of that, you have the X factor. The X factor in this one is foreign policy, where at any minute, we might see China advance against Taiwan. We might see bad developments in the Ukrainian resistance against the Russian invasion. We might see even worse developments in the Middle East. All of those favor the challenger in this case. And I think when people think about Donald Trump, they think about someone who, like him or not, has got a projection of strength. I think unless this administration is able to show the same, as opposed to going backwards to 2022, I think they have a real big task ahead of them.
A lot in this election has been bashing President Biden's mental acuity. It's no secret he's made plenty of gaffes along the way. But something that interesting happening on the trail now is former President Trump. He made a few gaffes comparing or confusing, seemingly, Nikki Haley to Nancy Pelosi. Do you think this matters?
I wanted to think that he did that purposely, right? In conflating Pelosi and Nikki Haley. But if he didn't, let's give everyone a little bit of kind of wiggle room here. I mean, it's to be on the trail all the time and to be measured by every word, and every word being parsed on social media and beyond. I give the former president a bit of a break here. I think Joe Biden clearly is aging in office. I mean, it's fair to say. And the question that voters have ultimately with President Biden is whether or not they think he'll be as energetic and sharp in another 4 years as he has been in the past 4 years. And if not, I think that's something that is more a referendum on the current president as opposed to Donald Trump.
I was listening to a podcast this morning, and a Republican strategist said 2024 is just 2020, but older now. And when I was having a conversation yesterday, and we were talking about 2020, and when you think about one of the worst years in modern history, 2020 does come to the forefront of your mind. You're talking about COVID, high inflation, a racial reckoning. So why, if you ask anyone, no one had a good time in 2020. I think that's fair to say. So why are we as Americans putting ourselves through this again? Why are we doing 2024 part 2?
We can't help ourselves, right? To be glib about it. This seems to be the way, this was kind of maybe baked in as we started to move to 24, that we were looking at a rematch. Yes, a lot of polls are out there showing that 6 or 7 out of 10 Americans wish they had another choice. The reality is they do not. There are no other choices that are out there that have really measured up or caught the public imagination. I don't take seriously the Kennedy and other independent candidacies right now in terms of finding critical mass. And yet, if I had to predict anything about the future, I think America is inexorably moving to having a third party in play. I think that the rise of independence, the increasing registration of voters as independents or undeclared voters as they would be in New Hampshire, is certainly putting in play something else that's inevitable, which is I think there's going to be more than a choice between A and B as you start to move forward. I just don't think it's going to happen this year.
And when then do you think that third party would be competitive? Would it be in 2028?
It depends on conditions. I think if the country is facing increasing challenges across the board, it just whets the appetite for wanting to develop an alternative. And what we might see in the 2026 midterm election is the rise of some independent candidacies in certain target states. And a lot of focus will be on those campaigns, Brittany, to see if they can actually be competitive in an off year. And if so, I think 28 might be the first time in American history where there could be not two vital choices, but potentially three.
And when you're thinking about the voters who would gravitate towards that third party, who are you thinking about? Are you thinking more Republican, Democrats, split? What does that look like?
Younger voters to begin with. I mean, one of the things I think Democrats are fearing the most about this year is the defection of younger voters from being more reliably Democrat. And that was a big part of the 2020 election success of Joe Biden. I think they fear that greatly. They also have had an ebbing to some degree of enthusiasm of the Democrats among African Americans and Hispanics. That concerns them. The big thing they had, of course, in 20 and even more so in 22 were women, especially suburban women. But the number one issue for suburban women is not going to be abortion in 24. The number one issue will be the economy and the future. And I think that's where it gets a little bit more difficult for the current administration, because I think this is going to be, as it was in 16, Brittany, a referendum on the status quo. The status quo right now is a Democrat in the White House.
It's interesting that the biggest issue is going to be the future when we're really talking about the past, the deja vu of 2020. But when we're looking at tonight, I know you believe it is inevitable. What should we be looking out for aside from Manchester? What needs to be on our radar?
Just simply the size of victory, the margin. This is one where expectations drive a lot of reality. The expectation right now, which wasn't in play, by the way, even 10 days ago, 14 days ago, when you saw some of the polls tightening in New Hampshire to the point where Nikki Haley, I think, was within 8 points, striking distance of the former president. But the expectation now is it's going to be a big win for Donald Trump. If it's less than that, maybe there will be a conversation after tonight. If it's that or more, and this is a terrible thing for all the political junkies out there. We want this to keep going until the convention, and even then, have an interesting convention. I think for all intents and purposes, it's over, and Joe Biden and Donald Trump will be facing off against each other, not after the conventions, but right now.
Wow. It's over. Adam Goodman said it. But Adam, I'm sure we're going to have plenty of conversations. I'm sure there will be many a Black Swan event in October surprise. I look forward to our conversations, and I hope you join me soon. But thanks for coming on today.
Looking forward to it, Brittany. Take care of yourself.